The events of the film unfolded on the huge cruise liner Poseidon, which in its size and beauty is not inferior to the Titanic. We gradually get acquainted with the passengers of this incredible ship. Among them is a successful card player named Dylan, who admires a magnificent sunset. On board are also a sweet girl Jennifer, her boyfriend Chris, and strict father Robert Ramsey. Robert scolds his daughter for poor behavior, and the offended Jennifer runs away from the cabin. In addition, the ship has a passenger without a ticket named Elena, Latin American. She secretly penetrates the kitchen, and we will find out that one of the waiters illegally ran her aboard. The waiter gives Elena a plate with food and asks not to leave the cabin. On New Year's Eve, a solemn party is taking place on Poseidon. Passengers tell the legend about the marine god in whose honor the ship was named. The famous singer Gloria is invited to the stage. Guests in tuxedos and beautiful dresses begin to dance. At this time, Dylan, Ramsey, and other men play cards. Having won the next bet, Dylan gets up from the table and accidentally knocks the tablet out of the boy's hands. His mother Maggie approaches him and smiles sweetly. Upon learning that she has no husband, Dylan begins to flirt with her, and it seems that Maggie likes it. Closer to night, the disco begins. Jennifer dancing cheerfully with Chris, and soon Elena appears on the dance floor, who was supposed to remain in the cabin. The elderly architect Richard is also traveling to Poseidon. He orders a bottle of expensive wine and admits to neighbors that he likes men. When chimes beat, passengers raise glasses with champagne, balloons and garlands fall from the ceiling, and everyone joyfully celebrates the new year except Richard, who seems to be going to jump overboard due to love problems. Meanwhile, one of the assistants of the captain is experiencing a bad foreboding. He looks at binoculars and sees something terrible ahead. A man requires urgently deploying the ship since a giant wave moves on the Poseidon. The captain announces the alarm and panic begins on board. A huge wave covers the ship leans, and most passengers are falling. Some are overboard and some of the metal structures collapse. Poseidon turns over and first lies on the side and then overturning upside down. Only a few manage to survive. Fuel tanks explode and many passengers fall into the fire trap. The ship gradually goes to the bottom, and it seems that people have no chance of salvation. However, part of the passengers who are in the gaming and dance halls still survive. Among them are Dylan, Richard, Ramsey, Maggie, and Jennifer. Unfortunately, Jennifer's boyfriend crushed a metal structure. He is alive, but cannot get out. The girl calls to help Elena, but their efforts are clearly not enough. Maggie finds his son Connor, who hangs above the ceiling and holds onto a huge piano. Ramsey grabs a thick receptionist and demands that the boy jump down. It turns out that he was a firefighter, and Connor jumps, falling into his mother's arms. Meanwhile, real chaos continues in the dance hall. Burned wires fall into the water, and those who survived after the wave and flame receive strong electric discharges. The surviving captain reports that the Poseidon was under the blow of the so-called wave of the killer. The crew managed to send the SOS signal, and now it remains only to wait for help. However, a few hours later, the ship may be at the bottom of the ocean. The captain hopes that rescuers will be in time, but Dylan does not agree with him. He wants to get to the surface through the bottom of the vessel where there are screws with holes. Ramsey also refuses to sit idle because his daughter remained in the dance hall. He does not know whether she is alive or not. Dylan finds Maggie with the little Connor. They want to leave with him. Richard and waiter Valentine join their group, who knows where the staircase is located. Our heroes make their way to the destroyed kitchen. To get to the stairs, they need to clear a large blockage in which the fire rages. This is too complicated. Dylan finds an official elevator and opens it with Valentine. To get to the second staircase, they need to go through the elevator shaft. Men use one of the tables for cooking as a bridge. This transition looks extremely dangerous. The flame in the kitchen flares up and they need to rush. Dylan and Richard are the first to go through the bridge, followed by Connor, then his mother, Maggie, Ramsey, and Valentine is the last. Unfortunately, the elevator cabin hanging in the mine falls and the waiter flies down with her. The galley explodes and the captain realizes that the survivors may not wait for help. Meanwhile, the Delon team continues to move forward. In the dance hall to Jennifer and Elena, another passenger joins, Lucky Larry. The three of them are trying to free Chris, and with the help of a lever, they succeed. Fortunately, the guy's injuries are not dangerous. They go to the exit and meet with the Dylan group. Jennifer is madly glad to see his dad. Heroes understand that you need to go further and look for the way up. They open a new door and fall into another room where they are faced with a serious problem. In front of them is a large abyss that can only be overcome along a narrow bridge. There is no other way out. Dylan checks the strength of the bridge. Richard moves first, then Maggie with Connor, Elena, and Chris. When Jennifer's turn comes, drunk Larry interferes. He insults Ramsey, accusing him of weakness, and confidently steps on the bridge, dropping his flask. Unfortunately, an unreliable design collapses, and a drunken insolent propellant drops down, which causes a new strong explosion. Dylan, Ramsey, and Jennifer understand that they need to somehow go to the other side. Ramsey offers to return and look for another way, but Dylan takes the cable, fasten it to the beam, and jumps into the water, sailing under burning fuel. He successfully moves to the other side and attaches the cable to the second beam. It turns out a real rope, and using a home-made carbine, Ramsey and Jennifer also go to the other side. Unfortunately, a strong explosion from the fall of the bridge causes a new catastrophe. The portholes and windows of the dance hall crack and explode under the onslaught of water, as a result of which everyone who remained with the captain dies. In the meantime, the team makes his way to the next compartment, but the door is locked from the inside. They decide to use the ventilation hatch and get to the upper deck. Almost all heroes successfully go through a narrow tunnel. Elena is very afraid, and she has to push her into the hatch. However, at the other end of the tunnel, they face a lattice. It seems that our heroes were trapped. Moreover, water begins to flood the mine. Richard gets stuck in the tunnel, and having overcome the hysteria, Elena liberates him, and they continue to move forward. Now they need to open the lattice. Using Elena's necklace as a screwdriver, they manage to do this. They open the next hatch and fall into the compartment for water intake. To go up, Dylan unscrews the valve and starts the water supply. She takes out the surviving passengers first in the second compartment and then in another part of the ship. The problem is that they have to swim underwater for a long time. Unfortunately, in one of the flooded corridors, Elena gets confused in wires and sinks. It is pulled out and tried to reanimate, but unsuccessfully. Our heroes continue to move on, making their way through heaps of garbage, and in the end they hear sounds on top. People hope that these are rescuers, but alas, there is no one there. Dylan notices the Poseidon map on the wall and finds the way out. Passengers have a hope for salvation. They run to the exit, but it turns out that the nose of the ship went underwater, and the output holes are also not available. Our heroes find an unsuitable cabin and discuss what to do next. In the meantime, the compartments of the ship continue to be filled with water. A new fire begins, followed by an explosion. Everything collapses, and the Poseidon changes the angle of inclination. Maggie and Connor are carried away by a stream of water. People notice that water has left the nose of the ship, and they have a chance to get out. Everyone runs to the exit under the screws, and Dylan goes to save Maggie and Connor. He finds a woman and goes with her in search of a boy. Ramsey, with the rest of the passengers, find the right screws, and it seems that the path to salvation is completely close. However, these screws turn out to be workers. Richard opens one of the hatches and breaks his face. Meanwhile, Dylan and Maggie find Connor, who somehow found himself behind the locked grate. Fortunately, he is not wounded, and with the help of Dylan, it is possible to free him. Ramsey brings the Prometheus card and explains that working screws need to be turned off, otherwise it will not be possible to get out. To do this, you need to get to the flooded generator and turn it off. However, the compartment with the generator is too far, and no one will have enough oxygen to swim there and return. Ramsey decides to sacrifice himself to save his daughter, her groom, and the rest of the survivors. He saves to the generator, but he ends oxygen, and he does not have time to turn it off. The only thing he does is change the direction of rotation of the screws. Dylan, along with Maggie and Connor, returns to the rest and learns about the heroic act of Ramsey. They see that the screws have changed the direction of rotation and understand that you can abandon something in them to break. Dylan throws a gas cylinder into the open hatch, but almost flies with him. The balloon explodes, breaks the screws of the screws, and Dylan flies away. He manages to survive again. That's who is a real lucky one here. 6 survivors are selected through the holes in the screws and jump into the ocean. They notice the life raft of the stern and float to it. Climbing the boat, our heroes are rowing away from the drowning ship. Having sailed to a safe distance, they are horrified to see a giant liner go to the bottom. Dylan launches a signal missile and it explodes, illuminating everything around with bright light. Soon, rescue helicopters appear in the sky, and the survivors rejoice at their salvation. I also advise you to watch other videos on my channel. Good luck!